Let me first say what an honor it is to be here. This is like no other party political convention in the United States. At the conventions of the Americans, other to old-fashioned political parties, you can expect to meet a group of paid party officials, officers from private corporations who manage and run their campaigns, and lobbyists representing industries who want to rub shoulders with elected officials. That's why it's such an honor to be here amongst you, candidates and organizers of the Green Party. You're not paid to be here. You're not cutting deals with lobbyists from the military industry or the American Bar Association or Exxon. Most of you have paid from your own pockets to come here. You've paid for your travel, you're paying for your hotel rooms, you've taken time from your jobs and from your families. This convention is a far cry from the old-fashioned party's gatherings. I've talked to you, I've walked among you, and I know why you're here. You're here out of concern. You're here out of love. Love and concern for your families, love and concern for your communities, love and concern for your country, and love and concern for your world. And I thank you for that. In their heart of hearts, the 300 million or so people of the United States, if they knew you were here, they would thank you for that too. You're here, I think, because unlike the old-fashioned political parties, you have yet to give up on the grand ideals of our democracy. You're here because you sense that in these times of crisis that Americans want to cling to those grand ideals rather than walk away from them, as the two old-fashioned parties seem hell-bent on doing. And it's those grand ideals you love that I, if you'll permit me, am going to talk about for a moment. The grand ideals of our democracy. I was introduced to these grand ideals, as I'm sure many of you were, as a child in school. I was told that in 1776 a great experiment began, a great experiment that people called democracy. The idea of one person, one vote. The idea that each of us gets a say in where our town, where our state, and where our country is going. Before that, at least according to the story I was told in school, it was the landowners, the aristocracy, the people anointed into nobility by the king who made the decisions. In short, the decisions were made by the people who had the money, and what they decided to do was whatever it was that would ensure that they kept the money. But what was amazing about the democratic experiment was the ideal that it attempted to manifest. That ideal was to attempt to collect the wisdom of a group of people with shared interests to work for the good of all, not just for the rich, and not, for that matter, just for the poor. That the people of these United States would come together in person or through their representatives. They would share their hopes and their dreams, their fears and their doubts. They would converse and debate and work to find a consensus. The poor, the rich, those from the West, those from the South, the farmers, the industrialists, the fishermen, the laborers, we would come together through our democratic systems, and we would synthesize our concerns and our views and work to find common solutions for all. That the wisdom in everyone in our great democracy would be taken together to find the greatest good for the greatest number. This great experiment had its faults. Not least of it was the large numbers of people who weren't at first included in the grand consensus building, namely women and Americans of African descent. But with time, this grand experiment that built on the goodwill between people grew to include more and more groups. If you think about this democratic ideal for a moment, it could bring tears to your eyes. The idea that the people of this great country whose ancestors came from South America, from Europe, from Asia, from Africa, from all over the world. That in this system we've tried to meld the views of such different people, but also to take the amazing wisdom from such different people and to bring it together for the good of all. The idea that we all count equally as we chose the direction of our shared fate, is the first grand ideal. Meanwhile, here in the United States, not only did we have the democratization of the political process, but we had the second great principle, the democratization of the economic system. We had an economic system that, at least as an ideal, offered equal access to opportunity. We had a system where if you worked hard, you got ahead. At least that's what my teachers taught me in school. Not only that, but by working hard, you contributed to the growth of the economy that helped all people. My grandfather worked in the belief that by simply doing his job, he helped his community and other families. Through his work, his taxes supported the town police force, the fire station, the water system. There was an idea in my grandfather's generation that the system of free enterprise called out in us the best in ourselves, which meant in turn that we gave the best to our communities. That was the second grand ideal of our great experiment, equal access to opportunity. You could work hard and move ahead. You could pay your taxes and keep your town going. You could start a good local business that helped people less fortunate than you. Not only was our political system democratic, but opportunity was democratic too. In other words, we had the ideal of both a political system and an economic system based on the premise that all people are created equal. That the views of every person were as important as any other, and that the hard work of any person had the same value as any other. This, anyway, was what I was taught in school. It was what a lot of us were taught in school. Now, as I've grown older, and I'm sure as many of you have grown older, I've been saddened to see where those ideals have been at times perverted. We've known since the 60s and 70s that in the inner reaches of government and the military and other places, our ideals have been betrayed, that Americans have been spied upon by their own government, that the very rich have too many privileges, that our secret agents have overthrown democratically elected governments around the world. In other words, in the gigantic grand scheme of world affairs, there's been a tension between ideals and practicality, between what a country wants to do to be good and what it feels it has to do to survive. And if you'll excuse me for saying so, there always will be that kind of tension. We have never been perfect, and we never will be. The practical and the ideal are often at odds. But we have been, at least at times, also very good. And sometimes we still are. For all our faults, we're still the oldest large-scale democracy in the world. We still have a constitution that guarantees us basic liberties, though they have been eroded. We still rank in the top 20 countries when it comes to self-reported life satisfaction. We still give more than any other country in foreign aid. And our ideals have gotten us through some tremendously hard times. There was the Great Depression, the 2 world wars. There was something about our country that we could believe in. And then there was something special about how we lived. And as we faced the tyranny of Hitler and Stalin, we could believe that we were doing something special, that we were fair to each other, that our system did something others did not, that it worked for the highest good of all. These are ideals that the American people still want to believe in. People want to speak to their highest selves, and they want their government, their corporations, and their institutions to cater to those high ideals. People want to be able to say that they live in a great country, not great because it is rich, not great because it is powerful, but great because it is good. And it was in part because our people believed that our country was good, that we were part of something transcended, that Americans were able to face the terrible 20th century hardships like the First World War, like the Depression, like the Second World War. And at least in part because we had these ideals, that all our concerns matter, that all our hard work counts, and the feeling that despite the so-called practicalities, we continue to reach towards these ideals, that Americans had resilience in facing the challenges, in the face of challenges. Now, once again, in the very beginning of this 21st century, we face terrific challenges. Challenges, I would argue, that rival the worst of the challenges of the 20th century. We're at war. We suffer terrifically high unemployment. The mortgage crisis means people are getting kicked out of their own homes. With the continued fiscal crisis in Europe, we all worry whether our economic system is on the brink of collapse. Because of global warming and other environmental crises, the very ability of the planet to support us as a species is at risk. But perhaps worst of all is that the American view of the future is as pessimistic as it's ever been. We, the American people, no longer seem to have hope. We feel we are at a dead end. People don't believe if we all work hard, it will be okay, as they once did. People don't seem to believe that our democracy is collecting together the wisdom of us all in order to do the best for all of us. We are not greeting these crises the way we greeted the Great Depression. We are not greeting these crises the way we greeted the two great wars. And why is this? They say it goes with economics. As economic opportunity goes down, so does optimism. But I don't think it's the drop in the economy that has us so glum. I think it's the precipitous drop in our idealism. To what degree are we, the American... To what degree are we standing up to our ideals? It's the standard by which most of us judge ourselves. It's the standard by which we judge our country, or each other, and it's the standard by which we judge our country. Because without our ideals, what purpose is there to our struggle? What meaning? We can go through bad times if we know we're standing for something. But people are asking, what is it that we stand for? They see that we are in wars to get someone else's oil. They see that the economic troubles are not the simple ups and downs of fate, but are caused by corruption at the very center of our banking system. They see that the political process has been hijacked by the corporations who pay for the Democratic and the Republican campaigns. They see that our very way of life is destroying the planet's ability to support us. Not to mention knowing that the United States now perpetrates torture, keeps people in prison without due process of law, that the money is going to the rich and the poor are getting poorer, that our children can't get a good education. For the first time in history, people around our country and the world have begun to think that our country, our government, our way of life, our great democratic experiment, and our economic system have failed, and fatally. Not because we have no jobs, not because we have no money, but because we have no meaning and no purpose. This is no longer the great experiment with its normal ups and downs. It has no sense of direction. This is not like the 60s and 70s. What we see cannot be explained by the simple tension between idealism and practicality. Instead, the problem has been the complete abandonment of idealism. There are those very powerful people in the two old-fashioned political parties who have caved into the challenges we face. They have caved into our crises. They are so cowed by what is ahead that they have given up on ideals. As a case in point, and I know I'm running out of time, 2 more minutes. As a case in point, both parties take so much money from the corporations that they have forgotten about the tremendous potential that can come from the wise voices of the people of the United States. Indeed, the two old-fashioned parties have allowed themselves to believe that the good of the corporations is the good of the people. In doing so, they have returned us to the days before our great democratic experiment. They have returned us to the days where the modern equivalent of the landowners, the people with the money, make the decisions about our country. In short, we have returned to the day when the decisions are made by the people who have the money, and what they decide to do is whatever it is that ensures that they will keep the money. Which brings me back to you, the Green Party, who sit in this room not because you are paid. You are here, I believe, because you still believe in our higher ideals. Because unlike those in the old-fashioned political parties, you want to work to bring practicality in line with higher human values. You are here, I think, because you can see a path through the crises. And that path comes not from abandoning our grand ideals, but from cloying to them more heartily than ever. You believe in real democracy, where the voices of people come before the voices of corporations, not just because it is an ideal, but because that's where the real solutions come from. In these times of crisis, asking our people to share their voices equally for the common good is not an ideal at all. It's a practicality. We cannot keep afloat if we don't all take to the oars. And if your ideals prevail, let me tell you what I see. A land where the son of the dock worker of a dock worker from Oakland, California feels as much pride in his contribution to the solution of our crisis as the daughter of a CEO from the Upper East Side of New York. A land where we value the hard work of a farmer who brings us good food as much as the banker in the Chicago Stock Exchange. A land where we are proud of what our country does in the world. A land, in short, where we are fair to each other. A land where we work together for the highest good of all. A land where we greet the crises with fortitude because we have something we believe in. 20 seconds, 20 seconds. 20 seconds. That is why I believe you Greens are here, because you've not given up on our ideals. In crises, ideals are practical. Indeed, grand ideals are the only practical thing. You know that, and that's why you're here, and I thank you.